The rupee has been falling dramatically against the dollar in recent months.
Rupee weakened to an all-time low, trading nearly 77.40 to the dollar. This as foreign funds rush to safety.
Institutional investors, overseas investors have pulled out well over 1,32,000 crore from the Indian market.
As lockdowns in China and the Ukraine war and fear of higher interest rates sent a nervous jolt through the markets.
Essentially, when rupee depreciates, everything we import gets more expensive.
Hi everybody, in the month of April, the Indian Rupee hit a 9-month low of 75.4 against the US dollar and had lost nearly 4.2% over the last 3 weeks. This made the Indian Rupee one of the biggest losers in the emerging market currencies. And then it went further down to 77.63 rupees per dollar. Now as soon as this happened, there was a lot of panic among the retail investors. But you know what guys, while most of us think about currency depreciation as just a bad thing, very few of us know that when the value of currency drops, it brings both advantages and disadvantages along with it. In fact, sometimes even giant countries purposefully devalue their currency just to grow their economy. So the question is, how is it even possible that a drop in value for currency can actually benefit a particular country? Why do countries purposefully devalue their own currency? And most importantly, as investors, what are the lessons that we need to learn about the change in value of a particular currency? This video is brought to you by JAR, but more on this at the end of the video. To understand this, let's start from the basics with the meaning of devaluation. People, we all know that the current dollar to rupee exchange rate, as in while the time that I'm recording this video, I have to pay 77.62 rupees to purchase $1. So tomorrow, if India decides to lower this to a fixed 85 rupees, then it is said that INR has been devalued. So now I would have to pay 85 rupees to purchase $1. This is what devaluation of a currency is. So in technical terms, devaluation is an activity undertaken by the monetary body of a country to officially lower the value of a country's currency within a fixed or pegged exchange rate. And usually this is done against the US dollar. And right now what's happening is not devaluation but the depreciation of Indian rupee based on the demand and supply of rupee. So it's definitely not deliberate. But you know what guys, while most of us think that this fall is a disaster, it's not actually that straightforward to conclude, because like I said before, along with disadvantages, there are several advantages that come along with it. So let's try to understand both these aspects using two simple case studies. The first country that we have is none other than China. Now, as a citizen of India, I kind of feel intimidated by China, but as a student of business and geopolitics, I must admit that China is by far one of the greatest and one of the bravest countries in the world. And one of these bold moves that they actually made was to devalue their currency in 2015.
China shocked the world with a major devaluation of its currency in a move that's going to have effect on both investors and politicians.
Tuesday, U.S. stocks came under pressure after an unexpected move overnight by the People's Bank of China to depreciate the yuan by nearly 2%.
The Chinese economy has been weak and getting weaker. They need to loosen policy.
The expectation is U.S. multinationals and their earnings will get hurt by a weaker yuan and a stronger U.S. dollar.
This is a story that dates back to 2015, and since the past 10 years, from the year 2005 to 2015, the Chinese yuan grew steadily against the dollar and appreciated close to 33%. As a result, it had created a lot of positive sentiment amongst the investors. But this is when suddenly the People's Bank of China, which is like the Chinese version of RBI, they announced 3 consecutive devaluations of their own currency, and the Chinese yuan dropped by 4%. This created such a panic situation amongst the investors that even the stock markets across US and Europe started falling. So the question is, why did China devalue its own currency and how did it benefit from it? Well, there were 2 reasons that were stated for that. Number 1, as we all know, China was a very well-known exporter of goods and commodities to many countries. On top of that, it was literally a manufacturing paradise with more than 20% of the entire world's manufacturing happening in China itself. But at the same time, if you see this graph, the GDP growth of the country had been slowing down massively from 2008 to 2015. So in order to boost the exports, China decided to devalue their currency deliberately. So now the question is, how does this devaluation benefit China? To put it simply, $1 was equal to 6 yuan in 2015. So if a company like Apple wishes to buy 500 million yuan worth of raw material from China, in dollar value, this would be worth $83.33 million. But after China devalued its currency to 6.12 yuan to the dollar, the same company will only have to pay $81.69 million for those goods. So when a country devalues its currency, it reduces the cost of a country's exports, making it more competitive and attractive in the global markets. For example, Vietnam, Bangladesh and Indonesia greatly rely on their footwear and textile exports, and this is primarily dependent on cheap labor. In fact, if you remember from our Bangladesh video, the reason why Bangladesh, Vietnam and Indonesian markets started getting orders for the textile industries was primarily because the labor and exports from China had become very, very costly. But you know what, guys? As soon as China devalued their currency, the labor in China became cheaper, and these countries actually lost a ton of business during that time. And needless to say, the Chinese exports actually started growing. So while export-heavy industries actually got benefited, the import-heavy industries actually got affected. For example, if a Chinese soap manufacturer imports palm oil worth $500 million at 6 yuan to the dollar, she would have to pay 3 billion yuan. But post-devaluation, for the same $500 million worth of palm oil, she would have to cough up 3.06 billion yuan. Now, if you remember from our Indonesia video, palm oil could make up to 20% of the input cost of FMCG products. So if a soap costs 10 yuan to be made, 2 yuan will be incurred by palm oil itself. So after devaluation, the cost of soap and every other import-based products will increase, resulting into inflation. This is the second outcome of devaluation. Thirdly, when import cost increases, it is expected to incentivize the domestic production, the highlight word being expected. For example, in India, when an import duty was imposed on the Chinese imports, the cost of these imports went up and suddenly there was a very huge demand for domestic production of solar wafers. Eventually, it ended up benefiting the Indian industries. So whenever the cost of import increases, whether that's due to devaluation, economic crisis or even war, the domestic industries stand to benefit. The catch over here is that they will benefit only if they are ready to embrace the demand. For example, if suddenly the cost of semiconductor imports increases, Indian industries can in no way benefit from it because we don't even have the capability to compete with Taiwan yet. So it would be incorrect to say that devaluation directly incentivizes domestic industries, although there is a chance of it happening. Why? Because it's quite subjective to which industry you're talking about, what sort of economic condition you're talking about, and the condition of those industries to embrace the change. And this brings me to the last point, which is international repercussions. You see guys, China is the world's largest energy consumer. It consumed 145 exajoules in 2020 compared to the US, which stood at just 87 exajoules. So you see, that's a humongous difference between the two countries. So since China is the largest energy consumer, China has a major say in how crude oil is priced. So when devaluation happened, oil price to China went up and China imported lesser oil. And during that time, the Middle East coincidentally was already pumping out a lot of oil. So when China cut its oil imports, a huge chunk of oil demand went away. As a result, the oil prices fell down and Brent crude went down by 20%. And this eventually ended up benefiting countries like India and other countries that imported crude oil. And at the same time, if you remember, during that time, President Donald Trump actually got extremely angry at China for currency manipulation, and he imposed tariffs on cheaper Chinese goods. This is what started a massive trade war between the US and China until COVID hit us in 2020. And by the way, devaluation is not something that's new only to China. It is a common occurrence among nations and has a major impact if you are a powerful country like China, US or the European Union countries. So the key takeaway that we have over here is that when the value of your currency goes down, there are multiple outcomes. Cost of export decreases, so if you are in close competition with other countries, you have a chance of actually winning back your lost business. Number 2, import cost increases, so input cost of import-based products increases, which causes inflation. And at the same time, it is expected to promote the domestic production. And lastly, it has international repercussions if you are a major player. Now the question over here is, did it accelerate the GDP of China? Well, not really. While the GDP growth of China remained sloppy, the exports of China actually increased by an extraordinary rate, going from $2,199 billion to $2,655 billion in 2018, which is an increase of 20.7% in just 2 years. So the question is devaluation a good thing to happen? Well, let's have a look at the other side of the coin. And here's where we have the second case study, which is the devaluation of the Nigerian currency. To tell you about it, in 1981, for $10 million, you could get 6.1 million nairas, with the exchange rate being 1.63 nairas for a dollar. But over the last 40 years, the naira have lost 99.8% of its value against the dollar. So in 2021, for the same $10 million, you would have to pay 4.1 billion nairas. And this has come on the back of a series of devaluation efforts made by the Central Bank of Nigeria, or CBN. In 2020, the CBN adjusted the official rate from 307 nairas to 360 nairas per dollar, and then it was further adjusted to 380 nairas per dollar. Now, if you look at this graph, you will understand how dangerously the spikes actually came up. So when nairas became so cheap, it should have boosted the exports of Nigeria, right? Because that's what happened in China. Well, guess what? That did not happen at all, because for exports to increase, you need more than just a devalued currency. For example, if a mobile manufacturing company wants to outsource its manufacturing unit to your country, you need to have ports, properly built factories, well-built roads for transportation, and a steady government policy that the company can actually rely on. And this was obviously not the case with Nigeria. On top of that, with such a drastic rate of devaluation, the import of goods became extremely costly, and inflation rate shot up to 16% in 2021. In fact, the price of cements, sand, granite, iron rods and other building materials had risen by 30%. And the worst part is that the very purpose of devaluation, which was foreign investment, that actually started decreasing drastically. It went from 24 billion in 2019 to 9.7 billion in 2020 and further dropped to 6.7 billion in 2021. Now, the point to be noted over here is that this is not just because of devaluation, but also because of the pandemic. So at the end of the day, devaluation just accelerated the trouble for the citizens of Nigeria, and now they are facing a very, very tough time. So these are the two contrasting examples of the outcomes of devaluation. And this brings me to the most important part of the episode, and that are the lessons that we need to learn about devaluation and in general, the effect of our currency value. But before we move on, I want to thank Jar for supporting our content. People, just yesterday, my father was telling me about how he used to save money in his gullak and used it to buy gifts for his close ones. But I just use a more advanced way of saving, which is the Jar app. Jar is my digital gullak. All my expenses are rounded off to the nearest 5 or 10 rupees, and the spare change is saved in Jar app. The best part is that it gets invested in digital gold. Like yesterday, I ordered a cake for my mother, which was around 493 rupees. So Jar actually rounded it off to the nearest 10, which is 500 rupees, and saved the chiller by investing it in digital gold. And it has an amazing feature of autosave. Using autosave, Jar will automatically deduct the difference and save it for me. With its daily saving feature, I can just set my amount, and every day that amount will get deducted and saved in Jar. So if you're someone who's looking out to start your daily savings journey, Jar is the right app for you. So download the Jar app from the link in the description and use the coupon thinkschool to get 5% extra gold on your first transaction. Moving on, the first thing we need to learn about currencies is that devaluation of a currency doesn't result in changes overnight. It takes time, but in the long run, as seen in the example with China, it could turn out into both benefits if done calculatively, and if not, it could ruin your country like Nigeria. The point to be noted over here is that more often than not, when devaluation happens, it does have immediate impacts such as plummeting of stock indices, fluctuations in prices of commodities such as crude oil, and depreciating currencies of other countries. Number 2. One of the biggest downsides of devaluation is that it would increase inflation, and that affects the end consumers like you and me. The price of commodities goes up and we end up paying more for living the exact same lifestyle. And lastly, it is a common belief that a stronger currency would produce a stronger economy. But in reality, a stronger economy would produce a stronger currency. Also, before saying goodbye, please have a look at all the study materials in the description that might be a little heavy for you to consume, but then eventually you will get a hold of it. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.